Hello, and welcome to the very first Creator Spotlight on Constructing Comics. On this episode, we are going to look at the work of Justin Ponsor. Justin Ponsor worked for Marvel for 15 years, and unfortunately, we lost him way too early at the age of 42. This is Matt, and I'm joined by my co-host Noah.
Hey there.
So this is our very first Creator Spotlight, and we wanted to do this as we've been talking about because of the untimely early death of Mr. Ponsor. So what we have here up on the screen is a little article that Marvel put up that shows some of his history and his background. And then we also here have his comic book DB credits, which are pretty impressive and pretty long with a 15-year career. Is there anything here that you'd like to call out as Noah as some of your favorites?
I would definitely like to call out his work on Ultimate Spider-Man with Brian Michael Bendis and all the artists that worked on that, from like Mark Bagley to Sarah Pichelli, all those people. Mm-hmm. He brought so much to that comic as far as like sticking with what previous colorists had established, and of course, just keeping a good tone across that whole run. But probably my favorite work done by him is anything that he's done with Jim Cheung. I really love the stuff he did on Infinity with Jim, and also all the stuff that he did most recently on the Marvel 2-in-1 with Jim. He's got some great stuff. Of course, all his work on the Spider-Verse with Olivier Coipel and Giuseppe Comicelli, I think, was on that. Just great work that he did on that series, making sure that you could, pick up in that book where you're juggling so many characters that look so similar. It really falls on the colorist to make sure that you're able to follow which Spider-Man is which in that book. Mm-hmm. He did a great job of working not only with Olivier's and Giuseppe's pencils and inks, but also doing a good job of adding to the storytelling as well with the colors. So I think that's just the mark of a talented colorist, but also with the work of just a good storyteller as well. I don't think I've read anything where he's penciled or inked, but I've definitely read a lot where he's colored it and, of course, fleshes out the world. Was I wrong about the 2-in-1, or is that? It's in his credits.
It has. So it looks like maybe for the 2-in-1, Frank Martin was the colorist, but he was definitely the color artist, which makes sense with it being a Jim Cheung cover. So
that makes sense, because Jim did all the covers on that series, and they're all really great. Yeah. So they okay, yeah, but yeah. Either way, his work with Jim is just brilliant, especially in the Infinity stuff, and especially in the Spider-Verse stuff. You can see those being, having huge impacts in pop culture today, with Spider-Verse coming out last year, and with Infinity, with Endgame coming out this year and Infinity War coming out last year. A lot of the stuff from both of those movies are lifted directly from that comic. Yeah. And a lot of the look of both movies owe a lot to Justin Ponsor and the work that he did with Jim Cheung on both of those series. And of course with Olivier Coipel and Giuseppe Comicelli on Spider-Verse. And on Ultimate Spider-Man, what he did with Sarah Pichelli with Miles Morales, establishing that look. The great thing about Spider-Verse, the movie, is that they tried to replicate every aspect of comic book art and the visuals of that film, and they really captured a colorist's job, showing how you use gradient tools to make highlights on people's faces, and then trying to replicate that and showing brush strokes that look more like digital, heavy, thick brush stroke colors. I think a lot of that is owed to the strong colors that Ponsor had on all the comics that he worked on as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this cover here, and just the the illumination and the glowing hand that's given to Thanos on this, and pretty cool that it's a third eye variant there.
Oh yeah, I think I have that comic, and that's yeah, I love that cover. Um, he his work of light in books, especially in Infinity, is just uncanny. He has so many great shots of like backlighting. And there, like when the Avengers show up at the end to fight Thanos on that series, he does these great hero spreads where the light shines behind them, and silhouettes, like there's like the shadow plays with the colors. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, and even if you look at something like this is a Scotty Young cover, which is by nature
much more toned down.
By nature, cartoony. It's that sort of Marvel babies, and to go from that serious, I'm Thanos, my hand is glowing, I have a power, to being able to do this just shows the range of ability there.
Yeah, he knew how to work with his colorist, and I mean with his penciler and his inker, and the way that he knew how to make the art feel fluid and not like, separated, where, you here's the inks, here are the colors, which I think is maybe my complaint of a lot of colors. When I see bad colorists, that's the main thing. They don't work with the line art. It's very separate. You can tell that like there's the ink, then there's the colors. Whereas Justin Ponsor's work really blended with whatever artist he was doing with, especially the line heavy artists like Chung, McNiven, Quapel, Openya, guys who are like, who are like very known very well for their like line thickness or their line, like, absence of thickness. Or just how many lines are on their artwork, especially with people like McNiven and Chung, who do a lot of cross hatching on their work. He did a great job of blending his colors around those lines so that, you look at it and you see the art, you're not drawn to one aspect of the process over the other. It feels like one whole image and not inks and colors, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this, and I feel like this is a Simon Bianchi cover, and this looks like it's painted like with with a paintbrush, which is goes along with that. And hopefully I have this correct. It could be entirely possible that Bianchi colored this himself because it's the cover. But if he did do this, that's pretty good.
We'll look at art later where he did replicate brush strokes in the colors as well. So like he does go, like he would, he knew how to balance between realism and expressionism with his colors. So we'll look at some like David Marquez stuff that he did on Defenders. Mm-hmm. It's very expressionistic lighting, like, a lot of like background light that's purple, and atmospheric and things, and knows how to blend it well with the lines of someone like Marquez. And then you'll see something like, like the Scotty Young cover, which is a lot of flats, just sort of blended together, but blended in a pleasing way that fits with the artist. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So let's, as you said, let's go to a little bit more of maybe some interior pages.
Awesome.
Yeah. So like, we talked about, this is a Marquez like Defenders page, and just sort of the shadow, the dark shadows, the twilight, purplish light. It feels cold. It feels like there's a mist, and I feel like a lot of that is done with the coloring. But what do you think there?
Yeah, I love how he, again, just a case in point of how he blends colors together in with the inks. There's that nice gradient from the inks, the black, at like the bottom of each character and how it leads up. Mm-hmm. He does a great job of not taking away from the high contrast of the art, but also not making the colors feel flat. Like, it blends in with the figure. It highlights the blackness of the inks, but it also makes the image come together really well. And here's also where I don't know how much of this is Marquez's texture, but like in the background, instead of going for maybe a more realistic, mist, it feels like watercolor or washed or something like that.
Yeah.
That in the background that he's added in there to make this cool mist effect go on. And even in the sky in the background, how he does the clouds and everything, it doesn't feel like he's just copying and pasting a picture of clouds back there, but it feels like brushstroke clouds, like you would see in a watercolor or in an actual ink drawing. There's an organic quality to his colors that a person who knows how to use the tools knows how to make. So he clearly knew how to do a little bit of everything as a colorist.
Yeah, let's go from something that looked dark and cold to something that looks bright and with a lot of light. Like this is something that a colorist has to do as well. Do the light sources. So like if you look at this, like it looks like we have two sort of light sources. We have from this side of I believe this is Star-Lord. This face right here, we have a light source, but then we're also sort of getting a reflection off the top of his hair, and his brow is shaded. That's all the work of the colorist. So what do you think about that image there?
Again, this is something that's very tricky to do when you're coloring, is not to feel like his hair is blue and to convey to the reader that it is light. So making sure that there's a light and and shadow. Light and shadow operate almost in the exact same ways, where shadow and light almost have mass when it comes to objects. So there are lighter parts and there are darker parts of the light parts, and then there are darker parts and then the lighter parts of the shadows. So when you're drawing light, whether you're doing it in black and white or your color, it applies the exact same way. So to make sure that you have a good silhouette, or like a good defining line between where the one light source ends and another begins, is really difficult. But it is kind of the basics of understanding lighting, where you have to understand that light bounces off of everything and reflects off of everything. So nothing is truly black, and especially when there are multiple light sources. So in order for Justin to make it seem like there's a blue light above him, but maybe something more fluorescent coming from the side of him, without making it seem like he just has blue highlights in his hair, is a really hard thing to balance. And I don't even know how to do it sometimes, but it's pretty impressive to think that there's it's the fine line to walk between having blue hair or just having blue light shining on blonde hair. I also love here that this is the most basic color scheme, but he makes it seem so complex. This is your typical complementary colors, where it's blue and orange, and and those complements on each end of the spectrum. So it's but he makes it seem so dynamic in how he colors it, and it's the most commonly used color scheme across the board. But this just goes to show that you can make something that basic look really beautiful in just how you draw it.
Yeah. So this caught my eye, one, because it's a hot cover of the moment because of Peggy Carter picking up the shield. But here, if we look at this, sort of the light reflection off of the shield, that again is his work. So that's pretty great work. I really like that. Let's see, that's without
that's beautiful.
The cover treatment there. The skill to have something look metallic and then then we have cloth, we have leather, we have debris in the background, we have stuff that's looks like it's ablaze in the distance. What do you think there?
Well, like you said, to balance all the textures within one reality, like you said, where you have cloth, you have metal, you have leather, you have was it her claws look like they're light sources themselves as
Yeah.
well. You have multiple light sources that you have to balance, and then you have on top of that, you have to integrate a character in a completely different style of artwork in that little with that the Wolverine, which I don't know what his role is in any of the comics, but
Yeah.
that he has to integrate a two-dimensional character into a three-dimensional world um, that still has to be out of place, but at the same time a part of the same realm. So he has to maybe not blend the highlights as much in as some of the other characters, but he still has to operate by the same rules of how light bounces off of him while being more two-dimensional.
Yeah, it's still these two figures are very photorealistic, where this is cartoony, but the attention to the light sources is still just as detailed.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Let's take a look at this one. This looks like
That's
this is
beautiful.
from a Star Wars comic. It's got a color scheme going on there, sort of the tans. But what's really cool here that I like is I'm assuming this is because looks like it's Obi-Wan from the captions. It's Tatooine, but even the detail to have the suns illuminated at different brightnesses. I mean, it could have been very easy to just drop a color there and then drop the same color on the second sun, but here he went through the detail of giving them different brightnesses.
And here's another example of working with shadow and light. And this looks like a Lionel Francis Yu drawing almost. I would guess that's sort of what it looks like. But the artist didn't, go for the, light source coming from behind you. Therefore, everything in front of you is all shadow. It's like, if there was only the light source behind me, I would all be in shadow. But the artist knows that the sand is reflecting off light, so that Obi-Wan wouldn't be all drenched in shadow, depending on where the camera was in relationship to him. So, if you're, of course, if you have a camera, and you have a fast shutter speed, you get more darkness and stuff like that. And if your aperture isn't as wide, I think is how it is, and then that lets in less light. But if you have it open wider, it lets in more light, so the shadows operate differently. So the artist knows how light works if you're looking at it as a camera, but also the colorist knows as well. So he knows that not to make the colors too dark in front of the character as well, because there's all the reflections, but also if you're shooting this like a movie, light operates differently for different parts of the story. It's an interesting choice. Yeah, I think I'm just sort of grasping at straws here to sound smart, but I do appreciate that. He, the artist in me would go for a full silhouette, to make all the colors darker with the backlight, but he found a way to make sure that you have the light source coming from behind you, but you also have a light coming from in front of you, probably from the reflection of the sand.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that is Stuart Eminem and not Lionel Francis Yu, but either way, great artists. So here's a cover from a recent Avengers comic, where we have Namor in his new sort of outfit. I think one thing that's great here is uh, this is an underwater environment, and you know, to sort of make it look like he's underwater, but still keep it detailed enough that it could be very easy to make this really murky, but murky water, dark, but we can still tell that he's underwater, but still make out all the detail of Namor and what's going on around him.
And it's cool to see how he makes it murkier towards the bottom, so that there is the one shark in the bottom right hand corner that is like not as in focus as, say, the one at the bottom left corner that's closer to Namor.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool choice to make, and also to have all the wave reflection lines on the ground as well was a pretty cool choice.
Yeah. All right. So, here, let's do this one. We talked about this one.
Yeah.
So this is another David Marquez drawing. I really like this one. I know with that Defenders page we talked about it feeling cold, but this gives you this feels like a cold, crisp, like November night, like where you need to wear a light jacket when you go out, and he conveys that with the colors here.
And I love how he does it with unconventional colors, with sort of like light magentas and purples, rather than just going full icy blue, to have this sort of this purple thrown in there. It's very expressive, and it's very artistic and stylized, and it works really well for this panel.
Yeah, I would wonder if it would be great to see the pencils, because I wonder how much of the mist and the fog is actually represented in the pencils, because I kind of feel like maybe that they aren't, and that's all something that because with pencils that would be hard to represent the way it's represented with the coloring here. So I feel like maybe that's an addition that Justin brought here.
I mean, it looks like Marquez did stop drawing at the usual feet cop out on this drawing. And it looks like Ponsor filled in a little bit with some of the brush strokes. And I'm guessing maybe Marquez drew in some of the smoke, but it looks like Ponsor painted over that as well to make it seem more, to contrast it, so that what is crisp, like you said, are the lines and the inks, and our eyes automatically drawn to that, and everything else just frames those inks.
Yeah. So I don't know if that one's a little bit hard to see. That one's a little bit smaller, but let's do this.
Very green and red, a lot of cool expressiveness. It's hard to blend. It's, again, another tricky thing to do with a page like that fight scene that you just had from Defenders. It's hard to not make green and red look Christmassy, and to keep the action going. So to use stuff like turquoise instead of maybe more lime green, or pine green or something like that, to use turquoise, and that really makes the red pop more. And of course, red and yellow are great intense colors with the most emotional visceral reactions to the eye. And of course, it just looks good when you throw green in there, because it makes the red look better. So that's pretty awesome.
Okay, well that one looks like it's a little dark. Let's see, how about that? That I like.
That's pretty.
Yeah. So looks like this is from Spider-Man 2. This is Sarah Pacelli art, but if we looking at this, we have a tan background, and then we have Miles and Peter here, but I did not mean to do that. But just the reflection on the shiny uniforms, the illuminated eyes, and I know that this was a bit controversial why the spider on his chest was glowing, but no fault of Justin. He shows that well. Um,
Yeah, he does a good job of bleeding the light out of it,
mm-hmm,
in both in the eyes and on the symbol. That he goes above the line art to show how bright the light is,
mm-hmm.
and but he doesn't do that with the reflections off of the metal. Distinguishing between different kinds of light bouncing off of objects is pretty great. And
Mm-hmm.
where like something as a light source might bleed over the lines, things that are just reflecting light do not bleed over the lines. That's really cool. Of course, he does that in some things, like he did that earlier on the um, Agent Carter as Captain America. The light shining off of the shield bled over the line art. But that was again just to show like the levels of brightness. I also love on that Spider-Man one how he goes the extra mile with the details to show how the webs are inlaid,
Mm-hmm.
into the armor. So he shows those little line reflections along the edge of the webbing. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I found this, and I'm assuming that he did this with markers on
Interesting.
um, on a sketch cover. But like even with markers, we have that sort of reflecting line on the pants. We have this metal skin surface. Looks like I'm not sure what. It looks like this is a combination of Colossus and Iron Man and Spider-Man put together, but this looks metallic. This looks like sort of your traditional superhero material on their costume, but to be able to do that with markers is a totally different skill set.
And it's really cool to see how he had a grasp over the medium,
Mm-hmm.
that he knew how to do physical just as well as he knew how to do digital. And he probably was trained in physical, but that how it translated well over into digital, just having that background in physical. Yeah, I love that little drawing. I also got to see how he has those Kirby dots put in there. So clearly paying homage to the King.
Oh, okay.
There's some Jim Chung lines.
Yeah. So this is like, what he would have been working with
Yeah.
previous to coloring it. So you can see how much, cross hatching, detailed lines. So as you were saying earlier, to be able to take that and work with it is pretty great.
Yeah, it falls on both like there's a good Jim Chung panel right there with the Cull Obsidian attacking I think that's what's his name? Is that not Gladiator? I can't remember his name.
Well, this
Yeah.
I'm not sure who that is now. Yeah.
No, he has some kind of name like Gladiator or something like that. I can't remember what it is. Again, going over the inks right here to highlight certain things like the flames, the green flame,
Mm-hmm.
and the orange flame,
Mm-hmm.
just to show the different types of light happening here. Also, not afraid to go full white on some of those reflections on the metal, on the monster's armor plates.
Oh yeah.
Pretty great.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how colorists are almost able to make sort of like, if we look behind this guy with this green, bright green, almost white, like to make it feel warm and illuminated just with like colors. That's pretty great, an amazing skill.
Yeah, it is pretty great. And again, just having that sensibility of knowing where do you go full white on an image, and where do you maybe just do a lighter version of that color. So like it looks like it might blend into full white and those green flames back there, but it's definitely not as white as those reflections on the armor. So just to have that, knowing, okay, here we're going to make sure that this stays green and isn't as bright as certain things here. And that has to be a sensibility that you learn so that you're not distracting the reader from what's important.
Yeah. So here's another Spider-Man image. Again, pretty great. The shininess of Spider-Man's suit, the reflections, the highlight and colors at the top of them. Some of it's catching at the top of the knee. Like right here on the Vulture's face plate. It's that's that's a see-through surface, a translucent surface, but like he gives it a little bit of a glow as the sun is coming down on it, and it's like just skill like that is pretty great.
Yeah, adding to the the humidity, I guess, of the air,
Mm-hmm.
how the light reflects off the dome. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, if you see anything that calls to you, make sure you call it out.
We can talk about the muted colors in that in the death carrying Wolverine cover.
Right here.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Again, a guy who knew how to go full color, full saturation, full expression, but then knew how to be subtle at the same time, like right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very understated, very gray, very muted colors. Makes something maybe a little more primary, like the reds stand out. And it just shows a well-rounded skill in being able to capture tone and emotion in your colors.
Yeah, no. So this caught my eye here.
Reflection.
Yeah, because when we did the Punisher page a few episodes ago on the podcast, we talked about Zemo looking. So when we were looking at that image, it was Zemo looking out, and we were behind Zemo. But with this one, it looks like we're on the opposite side of the glass from Carol. So we're looking in at her, and she's a little muted from the glass, but we're also we're seeing the reflection of what would be behind us in the skyline.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how reflections work. And it's impressive to see how people make it work and make it seem natural to the point where you're not thinking about looking for, how reflection works.
Yeah, because
you're not criticizing it for not being unrealistic.
Yeah, because even if you look here, like this little silhouette or this little sliver between the buildings and the skyline,
yeah,
like that's even represented here. Like it could have been very easy to just sort of color her uniform in and not have the attention to detail to also drop in that little space between that building, but that further builds to the reflection. I guess we also have it here on this shoulder here where,
and then it kind of cuts out on her head as well, the one building.
Oh yeah.
I really like how also in those details that you pointed out, it's not like he didn't just erase either,
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't just cut a line. It looks like he colored those parts and then almost muted them,
Mm-hmm.
Like it's still there, but just it would be there as if you were looking at it from over through glass.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at a couple more here, and let's see. Let's look
There's
at this.
a Quapel from Spider-Verse right there.
Yeah, and if we look at this is so. I'm trying to remember. I feel like this is Peter wearing some sort of cosmic Spider-Man um,
He's
costume.
Captain Universe.
Captain Universe. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, so like this material on his uniform uh, almost looks like we're looking like inside of it to see this sort of like detail, like the star and this sort of like space debris in this dark section of it. So like that's pretty great.
Something that you can only do well, like, and not have to worry about it too badly in like a two-dimensional medium,
Mm-hmm.
is something as trippy as that costume, where uh it's like the highlights are like, the shadow areas are like reflecting off of different surfaces, so they're not the darkest parts, they're the lightest parts that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the parts that would normally be light are the darker parts, and that's sort of where you get this cool like yeah, like the cool like universe like star system in there. Still, again, with that backlighting bleeding over the inks as well, is pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like we've done a pretty good representation of Mr. Ponser's work. Uh, let's let's look at this one here. So this looks like this is from a pretty recent Spider-Man issue, but like here, we have a lot more shadows than I think that we normally saw with his work. I mean, like this arm, the front of his face, the chest, this arm is all in shadows, and we have some light sources here, but like to do the heavy blacks and the shadows here, that's pretty great.
And that's just good artist colorist collaboration right there.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is a Cully Hamner penciled and probably inked page.
Yeah.
And he's so expressive with his lines as well. He's sort of he's closer to someone like Frank Miller than he is to someone like more photorealistic like Mike Diodato or somebody like that.
Yeah.
So he plays with lights and darks and negative space with his inks. And then I love that, he has the high contrast with the skin,
Mm-hmm.
to distinguish between the two materials of the skin and his fur vest.
Mm-hmm.
But he let Justin, continue the shadows, like, the shadow line on the blacks is continued through the fur,
Mm-hmm.
like he doesn't break the light whatsoever. Like he follows it and he blends it in like seamlessly with the lines that Cully Hamner created.
Mm-hmm.
And also adds to like, follows the light perfectly, where he realizes that, of course, the vest isn't going to be as dark as certain things, but it's also not going to be as light as other things as well. And it's got mass to it with still being a high contrast drawing.
Yeah. All right. So do you wanna tie? Well, actually, let's do this. Let's do this. Well, that's a little.
That's Frank Martin. You colored that one.
Okay.
I know that. Yeah.
So let's not do that one. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've found like a lot of great examples. If you see anything here as we're scrolling through, just let me know. But I feel like we're gonna bring this to a close. So as the artist here, why don't you give me a few final thoughts on the art here?
I have to say, one thing Justin Ponsor was good at, and this image that we're ending on is a perfect example of that. He was great with light.
Yeah.
He knew how light worked, and he knew how certain things are brighter than other things, and that light bounces off of so many different surfaces, and he knew how that light bounced off. But he knew how to use light to be, to match the emotion of whatever the story was, whether it was a sad moment or it was a happy moment or it was a victorious moment or it was a kick-ass moment, that kind of thing. He knew how light worked in those moments. And it's well, what's his name? Thomas Kincaid is known as like the master of light, in painting. I
Hmm.
would say Justin Ponsor is the master of light or was the master of light in comics, in how he would color and paint things.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And I'm even looking at this one here, and it's like even with these motion lines, like the motion lines were put down, but he even sort of adds to the the speed and the action that you sort of hint at in comic books. Like it really feels like she's Captain Marvel here is moving upwards in this direction, and the inks, the colors and the inks here are really working to do that.
And it's great to see, you know, a colorist that blends really well with the artist while still adding a lot to the image, but
Hmm.
not taking away from what the inker and the penciler have put down. Is that's and again that's good skill. That's a great, not just a great colorist, that's a great artist to do something like that.
Yeah, it almost seems like uh, a lot of times people make the statement that like you shouldn't. The only time that you like notice a letterer or lettering is like when it's done wrong, and like a little bit not so much with being like with being a colorist, but like it very well could be that like the only time you notice that the color the something has been done wrong with the color is because it's like I said, it's been done wrong, like the light sources are wrong, or something like that. So it's almost like that underappreciated skill.
Yeah, that's what you strive for in artwork, is not to take away from the message that you're trying to do by distracting everyone with your techniques. But it also, yeah, like you said, it makes people who are booked build, third on a
Hmm.
comic cover, like Justin Ponsor often was, um, seem like not as important as someone who was the penciler and the writer for the book,
Yeah.
even though without a good colorist or a good letterer, you wouldn't have a good comic.
Very true. All right, so I think that's going to do it for our very first creator spotlight. This was our for one of our first forays into the video realm. So this is going to be on our YouTube channel, which is Constructing Comics. So if you enjoyed this, give it a like and a subscribe, and we're hoping to do more of this soon. We're also on social media. We're on Twitter at ConstructCompod. We're on Instagram at Constructed Comics, um, Constructed Comics Pod, and we're on Facebook at Facebook/Constructed Comics. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into this very first Creator Spotlight, and we'll be back very soon with another one.